Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Transgender Show. I'm your host, Emily. I'm so excited to have you all here with us tonight, and I'm also excited about our guest. Our guest is Coley Alston. Coley is a Black, non-binary, asexual, neurodivergent, fourth-generation Pittsburgher who is always the first person on the dance floor. Very important. Their zest for Black liberation and joy led them to study public health and serve LGBTQ youth since 2016. Coley has served as the co-director of TransPride Pittsburgh, which is an organization that we are partnering with for their event in October 6th through the 8th, TransPride Pittsburgh Conference. Don't let the name Pittsburgh in that scare you off. It's a virtual conference and you can register anywhere and you'll be able to attend. Members of the trans and gender nonconforming community can register for free. So there's a lot of great content that we have for the community, and there's also good medical content in there as well. A lot of great stuff. So make sure you check out transpridepgh.org for more details and to register for that, because why not? It's free. Plus the Transverse will actually be there. I think we're presenting 2 things, maybe at least 1, but we'll be around. You'll see us. So let's go ahead and bring Coley on now to talk about TransPride Pittsburgh and the health and wellness event. Welcome to the show, Coley.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. It's great to finally get to meet you and talk to you one-on-one here. We've talked to Allison and Michaela and then Lynn. So it's great to have you as our fourth and sort of the closest to the actual event member. I think that we're going to actually be able to interview and promote this thing.
Cool.
That out of the way. Starting off with my favorite question, how did you choose your name?
This is a fun one. I get the meaning first. So Coley means one of a swarthy complexion. So similar to names like Melanie or Jet or Raven, basically means black person. And also is derived from the word coal, like the rock. And as a kid, I might be dating myself. That's okay. There is a rapper, a music artist when I was younger, Lauryn Hill, and one of her famous lyrics was, "Don't be a hard rock when you really are a gem." And that always used to make me mad as a kid. And now I'm just like, well, now I'm an adult and I am a hard rock. And I also thought it was fitting because I'm, born and raised in Pittsburgh. And one of the things about Pittsburgh is that we are abundant in coal. So I figure if I'm going to be in the armpit of Appalachia for the foreseeable future, why not embrace it? And also to embrace the non-binary naming rules of picking an article or an object. So instead of, sock or wrench, I decided to be rock. And that's how I came to be Coley.
So I like to start towards the end and then work our way backwards. When did you realize that you were non-binary, that you were part of the trans spectrum? When did that identity fit for you?
I knew by the age of 3 that I was different, and like not different in the like everyone's different and we embrace it, but like different in the like, oh no, like you might be harmed. And so I knew from 3 as far as like just being expected to perform in a variety of ways, but I wasn't actually able to parse out gender specifically at a young age. I know I was like expected to perform like very feminine gender roles, wear these skirts and dresses, you have to sit cross-legged or pretty, and if I didn't, I was just punished. But also thinking too about like, I was raised to expect poor treatment due to being Black, but also I have to stand up for myself, but not in a way that conflicts with my assigned sex. It just got really weird. And I noticed this at a very young age. Also too, I'm blind in this eye. So I was supposed to acknowledge that I'm visually impaired, but I also wasn't supposed to embrace the label of being disabled. So I just got a lot of very conflicting information from a young age.
Wow.
Yeah, and also did not really understand social cues very well through elementary and middle school. I eventually learned what is now, I didn't know I was masking, but I eventually learned to like pretend and like do the things that other people expected me to do. But I did struggle for a long time. So as far as the actual language of like, I am non-binary or I am transgender, I actually wasn't until I was in my 20s. Like I knew what transgender meant, but I had such a binary perception of what trans meant that I was just like, oh no, that's not me. Cause like I'm not a dude, but also I'm like, I'm not a girl either. So I'm just like, so in my mind, I'm just like, well, it's still wrong, and not actually wrong, but in my mind, wrong and different, and in a way that is not good, and not endearing for other people. But I learned the term non-binary probably in my early 20s, and as I got to meet more people who are part of my community, I really started to understand that we show up and we appear in a lot of very different ways, and it's not just that very binary concept of gender, as far as like you're assigned this or you could be that. It's not an either or kind of thing. So yeah, three I noticed, 20ish, I was able to actually like understand and do something about it.
What has your experience been in the trans community and trying to find a place in the community as someone who's non-binary?
So you're not asking me the questions out of order. No, oh, it's been rough. Like I said, I had a very binary concept of transness for a long time. So once I realized, like, oh, this gender, whatever my gender is, I think I might be part of this community. I didn't feel welcome. I was explicitly told, like, black trans woman to the front, which I absolutely agree with. Like, that makes sense. But I just didn't see myself. So I was just like, well, you can continue just not being of any worth or value or fitting in anywhere. So it actually was myself and a group of other non-binary people, and we did start thinking like, oh, like there's this organization that's for trans people, but we're not welcome because that's not our specific gender. And then we started making our own spaces and organizations, and then everybody else is like, what are you doing? Why would you make something different? And we're like, I didn't know I was welcome to the party, my bad. So now, of course, very much embrace the transgender label, in addition to being non-binary. I have more specific terms for my gender, but I generally don't share them with people. So yeah, that works.
What advice have you come across, or that you have you learned and would give to trans communities like ours that are very accepting and open to everybody under the gender spectrum, and actually even include allies as well? What is something that is important for us to keep in mind to make sure that it is a welcoming environment for non-binary people, or at least perceived as such from them, so that they are comfortable coming in?
It might sound contradictory considering what I just said, but I still firmly believe black and brown trans women to the front. I feel like the people who are most likely to be maimed, marginalized, maligned in some way, shape, or form should absolutely be centered in any type of meaningful work. So everyone who is of what do I call it? Mages, which actually was this is a term that was coined by a black woman. Of course, I'm forgetting her name, but it just stands for marginalized gender. So really opening up to like, this is a space for marginalized genders, which include women, which include non-binary people, which include, transgender folks. I think that makes a lot more sense if you wanted to be very clear about who this space is serving, and still being able to have that emphasis on, we want to make sure that people who are having the worst experiences and treatment are still centered and prioritized.
Once you came to came to terms with the fact that you understood that you were non-binary, that identity fit with you, was there a period where it took you a while to kind of like accept that and essentially come to terms with it?
No. For me, it was more a sense of relief. Like I just felt really good. Like, wow, like there is an entire I consider my non-binary a very large umbrella. So I'm like, okay, like this is determining a group of people who have had a similar lived experience. Probably don't have the exact experience. I've actually never met another non-binary person who has like the exact gender expression, presentation, perception of self that I do. But to be able to find other people who have had similar experiences, whether it's from a euphoric standpoint, like, wow, this person was able to access this type of care and, and love, and that's beautiful. Or it could even just be like, hey, you got ostracized, me too. So really, it was just a huge sense of relief. I will say that some of the things I've noticed for other people, and I'm saying this not in any like harmful or mean way, but because I work with a lot of young people, I've noticed, especially in the last few years, a lot of times young people will adopt the label of non-binary. And when I talk to them privately about, you know, like how they perceive themselves, they're like, well, I'm not actually non-binary. I'm really like binary trans, but this is like my like soft like segue into. And I'm like, oh, okay. So it's a little odd sometimes, but I still, from my perspective and from my experience, it's just been a huge sigh of relief. But I also too want to make sure that we we're constantly pushing back on this perception of what non-binary looks like. It still has a very strong stereotype of being associated with like thin, white, able-bodied folk with like colorful hair, and like that doesn't detail most non-binary people. When I think of non-binary people, I actually think of a lot of indigenous communities. So like even knowing like what comes to mind when you see it, when you see this word on print or you think about it, I think that's really helpful to um, what is the word? To kind of decenter yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very tough thing. Again, you know, perception in our society is just a bear to wrangle with at all times. But you know, the typical thing I hear is that non-binary people fight with the desire from others that they present in an androgynous way, right? That's what non-binary means to them is some form of androgyny, and again, to look a certain way, that androgynous model look from, what was it, the 80s or 90s, and you know, kind of fit into that. So it's an unfortunate thing that even in the non-binary identity, which is supposed to be, like you said, that big spectrum of people who are just not on these two extremes, there's still an extreme kind of a particular view that people want you to adhere to.
For sure.
What was your coming out process like once you decided, okay, this is my identity? Was that something that you shared broadly, or was it kind of small pinpointed areas?
I would say fraught. My process of coming out, it was not. Oh, what is the word? Basically, for safety reasons, I got really good at people pleasing and masking, and you know, like being viewed as like this safe, acceptable person. And so I kind of boxed myself in a certain way where people were just determined not to see who I truly am. They just wanted to see like what they were used to receiving and especially taking from me. So it was really hard. I will say that I came out, well, most people come out multiple times, so that's not unusual. But every time I felt I would share a huge piece of myself and who I am, I would be treated so badly that I wouldn't share again for years. Like it took a long time for me to really get comfortable again to try. I know in high school I had a very specific plan that I was going to fly under the radar, keep my head down, not be noticed by anybody, so that I can get out of my family home, so I can get to safety. So my entire high school years were just focused on I need to pretend to be someone else so that I can actually make it to my future.
Mm-hmm.
And even in college, it wasn't, I thought, you know, okay, when I go to school, when I get away from these people, it'll be better. And it's like, it just gets different. No shade to Dan Savage, but the whole "it gets better" thing, it's like it gets different for sure. But I wouldn't necessarily say better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, at least not instantly. It takes a lot of years, and not everyone has a lot of years, especially if you're in a more dire situation. So, coming out. Um, I would say one of the things that was really helpful for me coming out was actually getting involved in the drag community. That was in a realm where I was actually able to be myself. Like people are like, "Oh, who are you dressing up as?" I'm like, "I'm dressing up as me." Like, and to be able to be seen and perceived in the way that really made me feel welcome and good. That was really helpful, and I was able to kind of like bleed out some of my drag life into my actual lived experience in reality, and that was really good and helpful, but it definitely took a long time. I for the longest time just didn't think it was accessible as far as transition transition being accessible, not so much coming out. Like, yeah, I could come out, but it's just like, why would you do something that's just going to make you so unsafe and so targeted, uh that, yeah. So my long story about coming out is basically like, when it's safe to do so, yes, I do share who I am. But I also will say that a lot of people should not have been trusted with who I truly am, because their reactions were physically or sexually violent. And, that's something that I don't push people to force upon themselves. It's really about perception of like your personal safety. And if you do have access to people who are going to be warm and receptive and at least, wanting to understand, because I do have a lot of people in my life who are just committed to misunderstanding me, whether that's around my gender, whether it's around my neurodivergency, whether it's against their projections about how they view me racially. It's just, there's a lot of layers there. Sorry, it's not a pretty, that's not a pretty answer for coming out. But yeah, I'll leave that there, because you're gonna ask me plenty of good questions.
In a lot of ways, it's not a pretty world, right? I mean, that's a lot of the stuff that you're fighting against. Your gender identity is something that you can choose to kind of hide, sort of pull back on, not share too much about it, or not share anything about it. Whereas your skin is something that is just out there, and that's something that you can't. So I understand why you're not gonna be able to go through a day without some kind of discrimination, but you can sort of limit it and protect yourself from at least some of it.
I said that gets weird too. We'll talk more about it.
Well, first off, did you have anybody that supported you in a way that you weren't expecting or surprised you?
Ooh, I do, but that might make me really sad. I'm gonna try not to be sad about it. Yeah, I did have someone who was very, what's the word? Not pushy. Like, I think that's the thing where a lot of people, when you're coming out, they expect you to have everything kind of detailed and like, here's a PDF file of like who I am and what I'm about. And it doesn't usually work that way, because we're human beings and we're complex. And thinking about one of my good friends and how welcoming and warm he was, and not just around gender stuff, but in general, like me as a whole human being, to have that freedom and that safety to be able to say what was actually on my mind and not be judged or not have someone jump on me, even if we disagreed, because we disagreed a lot. We fought like cats and dogs verbally, but very sweet, and I do miss him very dearly. He was so warm and considerate of other people that a lot of us didn't even really understand what he was going through at the time. I was in college, and he was actually homeless, and no one knew. He would go to the club office, and he would just be there all the time. So I was just like, "Oh, cool, you're here again." And he never told us directly. He told us after, when he got some housing and some safety. But yeah, he had come out to his family, and they kicked him out. And so he had been living effectively on the street and in the Rainbow office and wherever he could, stash away for a couple hours. But unfortunately, he did die almost a decade ago.
I'm sorry for that loss for you, especially if somebody who was a good supporter and a good friend in the community.
Oh yeah.
How difficult is it for you to, just on the base level, get across to people what the non-binary identity is? Is that a fair bit of the struggle in coming out?
Not really, mainly because I've kind of given up on people. Like, if you can't do your own homework, and show a base level of humanity, I don't have time for you. But I will say, for me especially, that is a super privileged thing to be able to say and do and operate. Because again, it's still a privilege to be able to work and serve people who do not have access in the way that I have access. I spend a lot more of my time protecting others and making sure that I'm showing up for people in the ways that is most helpful to them. So I don't necessarily think about it so much in my perception as far as like if someone truly sees me. I will say most people don't. Most people who interact with me, like, they know I'm non-binary. They just like words, and they're like they'll memorize my pronouns maybe, but like they don't actually do anything to deconstruct their perceptions of gender and really help people. They just think that it's a polite kind of thing. So I don't really mess with people on the surface level. But again, just in the ways that I'm able to show up for in my day-to-day life, I actually am able to go and train adults, to be better and to show up better for young people. I'm able to get people connected to legal aid, help support young people in their school settings, in their homes. If they have a parent or family member who's just like, I just don't understand non-binary, I have clinicians who I can send to their homes and really help their parents, their families work through it on their terms and not have to have that young person suffer and constantly be, like torn apart and misgendered and misunderstood intentionally. So I'd like to focus on the work
Hmm.
more than anything else. And again, it's a huge space and place of privilege that I'm able to do that and able to even be myself physically safe enough to like stand up for others because like I know I'm okay.
Hmm. Well, that's such an interesting story that you have this sort of cynicism about the world around you and their ability or desire, their own limitations in accepting you and understanding you, and have instead focused on the community and helping youth and other people who are struggling get through, get through their level of understanding. What were some of the key fears that you have experienced in your gender journey and coming out, exploring your identity, exploring how to dress and how to be? What were those fears and how have you overcome those?
Well, I have a lot, but I think I might have to run it back a little bit to like really illustrate why it was such a big fear. Um, and it's going to get a little dark, unfortunately.
No, that's
But I
that's
think,
that's fine. Yeah, we definitely want the thing is we're trying to share our stories here to show other people they're not alone. So if you had a particular experience that might seem kind of dark, there's somebody out there who is going through that same thing and needs to hear that story. So yeah, please share.
so I did want to share a little bit more like on my background as far as how I was raised. Long story short, the Christian church and the Christian elementary school I attended made me very fearful. I got a lot of very conflicting messages. People would say things like, our God is loving and makes no mistakes, or our God hates ugly and abominations. Jesus loves everyone, and here's a list of people Jesus doesn't love. We must suffer in this world in the hopes that the next world will be cool. God gave us free will. God is watching and judging you constantly. So, from a really young age, I actually started praying to die very soon so I wouldn't suffer by embarrassing God by just being alive and existing. I was very convinced from my upbringing that there was something inherently wrong with me.
Hmm.
Um, and unfortunately, and that was around 8, where I remember starting to think like if I died, it would be much better. And that's how things need to be. And unfortunately, it got worse because my mom sent me to a Christian conversion camp when I was 12. And at first, I didn't really understand like why I was at the camp I was at. When my peers were there, they were like, I stole my mom's car. I took money out my dad's wallet. Or there's like, yeah, I got expelled from 3 schools from fighting. So I was trying to figure out, me, a child who doesn't have an issue with stealing, lying, fighting, any of that kind of stuff, why I was there. And it wasn't apparent until a camp counselor welcomed us and informed us that we were going to be working on our sinful ways. And apparently, defying gender roles and being queer was another sin in the same vein as like lying, stealing, cheating, etc. So um, that actually was horrible. And honestly, like I a lot of times I don't mean to downplay it, but considering I've had friends who have gone through other more what's the word, more ongoing violence, like electric shock therapy and things like that, that a lot of times I don't realize like how bad it was because it's not the worst thing I've ever heard.
Hmm.
Again, not trying to downplay, just how my mind works. But I will say, ever since that camp, that camp was really the catalyst for my suicide attempts and my self harming habits and practices. And I say all that to kind of feed into, from that point on, it was alternating between like, I have to die, I have to die, or I have to be really good at being invisible and pretending to be whatever it is people need me to be so that they don't notice me, so that, I can just kind of like, hopefully like drift off into the background, and I won't be targeted and people won't think about me. Um, all of that really affected my perception of myself because I didn't really plan to be here. I didn't think I deserved to be here. And I never really had an opportunity at a young age to think about, if things were different, how could I build that future for myself? So I say all of that, and that fueled a big portion of how I perceive myself. And when I did finally realize, like, I'm not broken, I'm not unlovable, I'm trans. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, that was it, like that would have saved me years and years of suffering. But also with the realization of learning that, I was trans. So, well, again, my perception is like so late in life for me, and, thinking about myself in my 20s versus, a lot of my close friends, they didn't find out till they're in their 40s or 50s that they're trans. So perception is everything. But anyway, back to me. In my 20s, I was just like, well, everything that would have been an option to me is now no longer an option. One, because I don't have the financial means to actually, transition in the ways that would be most fulfilling to me. And even if I had the money and the means, like, I don't deserve it, because, like, it's not that bad. If I pretended this long, I can pretend a little bit longer. And that's kind of how I kind of viewed it. Like, my issues are not as bad as other people's issues, so I don't deserve good things because I should be happy with what I have. Which also is not, that literally serves no one. So I did have a lot of like self-sabotaging behaviors and just kind of like, this is as good as it gets kind of things. But it wasn't until my late 20s, and I was like, okay, well, yeah, I can just, until infinity, I'll just keep binding and keep doing this. And it got to a breaking point where I don't remember which bullet journal, because I've kept journals for years, but there was a bullet journal. I can find it. I'm not gonna find it for this, but and there's a specific page that says, if I don't get top surgery, I'm going to be dead by, this time next year. So I, again, am a very planful person. So I did start planning and figuring out, what can I do to access this? Like, even if this bankrupts me, even if I can't go to the person who has like the coolest and latest and greatest technique, what can I do to potentially live? Because I could not see a future for myself. And I was very, very worried. But the way I kind of present, when I am in that state of mind, is that everything's real cool, like, because like things are gonna be really good, because if they're not, then I don't have to worry about it, because I won't be here to like address any of the things that aren't good. So terrifying to me, but to other people, everyone's just like, oh, Cole is just being cool, being calm, whatever. And I'm like, it is very scary. Like, calm is not good. um so yeah, and that's when I really got on the path as far as like what I needed medically, to move forward, and to see a future for myself.
You brought up a very key point in there, and I think it's something that we all do. There must be something in our greater society that kind of pushes us to do this and to think of ourselves this way. But it's always someone else has it better than me, so my needs, my pain, my struggle is invalid, is not real, is not, yeah, it's not a real struggle because I haven't experienced what other people have. Like, that person's is worse, so I need to shut up and just suck it up. And that's very minimalizing, and it's you're essentially gatekeeping yourself and saying that I can't consider myself part of a traumatized group or whatever, or most importantly, seek help for it. I don't deserve help. I don't deserve any kind of care for this because someone else has it worse. That's a very dangerous perspective, because then you get into what you were doing and what I was doing to myself, and you think that, well, I don't deserve the help, but I can't deal with this on my own. I don't deserve to be here. It's a very unhealthy way to think about it. the thing I try to tell people, and it's part of like empathizing with what other people are going through, is everybody's struggle is, I feel like in our own minds, it sort of ends up being the same. It ends up being the same way. Yeah, if you go through an extreme thing, you can say, "Oh yeah, that one-time trauma was, was worse than what I experienced or whatever." But there's just a way in our brains where things kind of level out, and if we experience the same trauma for a certain amount of time, I feel like it's that same peak trauma for us. Like you were worried about getting top surgery, and that was top of mind. That was something that you could not continue on without having. So there you go. That's that top level of stress and strain, and you just experience that long enough. And I feel like it's the same for everybody. Whatever is your worst thing that you're most fearful of or you're most struggling with, there's sort of a ceiling to how much you can stress about any one given thing. So to say that my stress, my experience isn't bad enough, isn't as bad as somebody else's, really ignores that fact. And I think it's important for us to remember that our struggles are our struggles. We have to accept it and know that it is as bad to us in our hearts and in our minds of what we're dealing with on a daily basis as what other people are going through. And take that and say, I deserve help. I deserve to be taken seriously, and yeah, seek help and get what you need to be happy. Gonna get off that soapbox and get us moving on a little bit here. So as you came to grips with your identity, you realize you're non-binary. When you're a binary trans person, there's a much clearer set of steps. There's sort of a gender journey that you accept that, oh, that's what I should be doing. You see lots of people doing it and you just kind of accept that. What is that process like for a non-binary person? Do you just kind of go like, I have no idea what that looks like, so I don't know where to start? Or were there things when you started you knew already that were going to be in your future as far as goals?
Sorry, this question is not overwhelming in its nature, but it's depending on like which version of me I'm thinking about, and not which version of me, but like which age. Because if I could just go back in time and change things, I think I would have gone on blockers, and I would have been a great candidate for that. And I might have very different perceptions to what type of hormone treatment or other medical treatment I would seek out. But I kind of feel resigned to like both basically the shell that I'm currently in, and I feel mostly resigned to it. So for me, the biggest aspect was just removing the things I'd never asked for. Like I literally never ever in my life asked to have breasts. Like I just not that's not what I wanted. And it came with a lot of unwanted attention and touching and perceptions of like just I don't know, not even just perception, but even just like staring. Now I'm able to just walk down the street and I'm very flat and nobody bothers me. No one tries to like eyeball me or anything like that. So a lot of my focus was just like, how do I undo some of the harm that the sex assignment has caused me, versus like trying to forge a different path. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. I do feel like I could definitely have seen myself had I had access, had I had the means years before, like I would have looked very different. I probably would have had a much more masculine presentation. And this at this point, it's not that I've given up. It's just that like the amount of time and energy and effort I'd have to put into potentially, accessing that, I refuse. Um, so, and I don't know, and I'm really supportive and happy for all the people who I can help, eliminate those barriers and get access to. So I focus a lot of my joy there in living kind of vicariously through others, where other people are saying like, this is exactly, how it was always meant to look, how it was always meant to be. And that brings me a lot of joy. I will say, what is the word? Post Oh, I never did finish that longer story, but post top surgery, I was able to actually see a future for myself, which was actually really scary, because I, again, based on my upbringing, I didn't see myself at 18. I didn't see myself at 25. Like, didn't see 30. So, like, just this idea of like, I'm at an age that I never expected to be at. So, like, what do I do?
Hmm.
But I will say, post top surgery, I was actually able to see much more of my future. So, prior to top surgery, I was able to say, like, I might be around in a few months, maybe. But now I'm like, no, I can definitely see myself a year from now, 5 years from now. And I never had that type of foresight before. So that's really cool and overwhelming and exciting. And I don't know, I feel a renewed sense of possibility for myself. Not just me personally, but the ways that I might be able to show up for other people. So I will say, like, more than just a physical outcome, I did receive a lot more too, for my mental well-being and just general livelihood.
That's amazing. That's wonderful that one step, that one surgery was able to unlock all of that for you. And it
Oh,
makes perfect
sorry.
sense why it makes perfect sense why having breasts, all of that things that brought along with it, contradicted everything that you were trying to do, trying to stay below the radar, kind of blended in the background and not be seen. That really threw a monkey wrench in that.
Because I developed really young, unfortunately, with the United States, a lot of unsafe things are put in the black hair care products. So I started developing breasts at the age of 9. Um, so was very horrifying, and to have all of this kind of stuff thrown at me, because before people would tolerate that I mostly ran around in like overalls and stripy shirts and I was just very rough natured child. And as soon as I started developing breasts, people were like, well, now you need to be a lady. You need to do this. And I'm just like, oh Lord, no, like don't. So that's really where I would say, like, that change in my body really changed how everyone and everybody reacted to who I was as a person. And then also, again, just being black in America, very unprotected. So, again, when just a lot of like unwanted sexual harassment and violence and other things too that came with it. Just as like, it's not a good look. One thing I did not mention though too is also, uh, it wasn't just a matter of me wanting to be under the radar and not be perceived and kind of masking in that way. I was not physically in my body. I didn't realize until after top surgery, but I had dissociated my perception out of my body for so long that I actually did have to take a couple years just to learn how to, like, this this is part of me, not just like, I don't know, I was kind of like operating it like a meat suit, like I was a little like an avatar. You remember the first Men in Black where there's that itty bitty alien inside that old man's body?
Mhm.
Like, that's basically how I was kind of piloting through my life. So, like, to actually realize, like, oh no, like, this, it is a shell, but also like I need to care for this like body and preserve it, and also like be present in it. And that wasn't something that I would say I was able to have access to prior to surgery.
Yeah, I'm sorry that that's a rough experience. We all experience something similar to that in the trans community, that disconnect from our bodies, but that's a pretty extreme version of that. And I'm sorry you had to go through that.
Just glad to be back in my body. Like, wow.
Yeah, yeah, you're there and it's just like, oh, okay, this is yeah, this is works, this works, this fits. That's good. Let's get to the kind of final questions here, and then we'll revisit some of these things after we take our break. But is there anything that you feel that you've been able to accomplish because of your transition or your gender journey, that is?
I mean, just like the ability to like be here in the future, I think that's pretty impressive. Um, it seems silly to say out loud, but like, no, I really did not plan to be here. I did not plan to exist. So because of my being able to access and my access medical needs, and also just do have the physical safety to even perceive myself and conceive like an idea of who I am, that's really been life saving. So it sounds, I don't know. it doesn't sound as impactful as it is to me, but I know how much it is. So I'm like, that is.
Yeah, I did a special on the Transverse here on my 45th birthday last year, because for me that was my last day for many years. I just determined that, like, that's pretty old. That's a pretty good run. If I haven't figured things out, if it hasn't turned around for me by then, that's it. So I made sure that we did a special to talk about that and to talk about depression and what it looks like, how to see the signs of that, and um, that what I talked at length earlier about is something that's really important to me. Just realizing that you matter, that you are important, that the struggles you're going through are real, and they matter, and you deserve to live. You deserve to be loved. You deserve to be taken care of. And now that we have the means finally in our community, you deserve to be in the body that you're supposed to be in, the body that feels right for you, or at least as close as you can get it. We can get pretty close. So um yeah, that's just a really important message for everybody. What is one of your favorite things that you've learned, either about yourself or the world around you, along your journey?
It doesn't pertain to me specifically, but it's just really cool. Did I say specifically? Anyway, it doesn't pertain to me personally, but I think it's really cool in that as I learn more and more about different non-binary identities, I really appreciate how different we can be within the community. Like, I was chatting with someone, and they were trying to explain, and I'm gonna butcher this, unfortunately, but they were trying to explain that in their culture, you there's a very low probability that you can be multiple beings inhabiting one body, and that is how they're non-binary. And I'm just like, that is so cool to even think about and fathom. And I'm just like, and just knowing that, like, that is not at all how I perceive myself, but also really neat in that there's this huge umbrella, and knowing that even so that that's not my personal experience, that I still want to love this person and fight for their right and their ability to be seen and perceived and have access to the things that they need in order to live their fullest life. So I don't know, it's just really neat.
That's really cool. Yeah, I was really happy when I heard of the two-spirit identity that the Native Americans have in their culture. And it's just like, oh, that's such a cool idea that, yeah, you inhabit both. You represent the best of both worlds.
Yes, in this case, it's not the best of both worlds. It's some type of like malevolent spirit that's not supposed to be Earthside. So, but still really freaking cool.
So through your journey, do you have any advice to pass on to younger closeted trans folks out there?
Ooh, yes. But oh my goodness. It sounds so cheesy, but I really just to hold on and to know that there are other people who have similar lived experience. It may not be in your school, it may not be in your podunk town, but I promise you, there are other people in this world of what, nearly 8 billion people now, who have similar lived experience, and you're not alone. Even though this road might feel really lonely at a lot of times, at a lot of points, and also to realize and recognize your worthy companions and your allies, the people who show up for you, even if they don't share those same experiences. You will find your people, um, or they'll find you.
That's beautiful. Well, Coley Alston, thank you so much for coming on the Transgender Show and sharing your story with all of us.
Thank you.